Welcome to Home for Ambition. I'm John Colliker, co-founder and CEO of Leland. We created this show for ambitious people like you to stay ahead as work and learning and opportunity and everything seems to be changing. AI is creating a lot of leverage, but it's also creating a ton of noise. And most people are still sort of figuring out what matters and what to do about it. And so in this show, our plan is to break down a few of the biggest ideas and topics. It's not going to be a news show, but it is going to be topically relevant and go through the realistic perspective of which we are still figuring out with you. But then also try to have a little bit of a hope angle to this as well, where we actually share. So what do we do about it, right? And I think Mike, Jake, and I we'll do introductions here in just a minute. We see this every day while we run Leland, because we see people from all over the world pursuing all sorts of different goals, coming to us saying, what does this mean for software engineers or data science or medical school or, you name it. And so we wanted to share some of that, some of what we're seeing. We'll invite different guests on different topics. And we're excited to kind of learn with you. So let's get into it. I'll give my introduction, then I'll kick it over to you, Mike and Jake. I'm John. I mentioned co-founder and CEO of Leland. My background, I have worked in technology for the last 10 years at Uber, LinkedIn, a startup, went to Stanford for my MBA, and that's where started working on Leland. My background is in product management primarily, is now, I guess, touching all parts of the company. So I've, engaged with sales, with marketing folks, with finance people across the entire company, and have never felt so uneasy or felt so many new things happening as I've felt in the last really 2 to 6 months. So that's a little bit about my background. Mike, maybe I'll kick it to you, and then Jake, you bring us home.
Yep. I'm Mike. I run product at Leland. Have been here for the past 5 years. Before that, worked at a couple other startups and VC firms. And so have been in the tech industry for roughly 7 years. Yeah, John talked about this a little bit, but technology, like humans have been inventing and innovating for the entirety of our lives, or the entirety of humanity. But there's never been something as close to the human soul as AI. Going from a horse to a car just makes us more productive, but replicating human intelligence just feels so scary of like, what is left if not my brain and my intelligence? And so personally have been feeling a lot of AI doomerism, and John and Jake and I have been talking about this a lot, which sparked the idea of, this is something that the whole world is going through and something that needs to be talked about. So I'm really excited to dive deeper into these topics.
Cool. Yeah, I'm Jake. I've done startups kind of my whole career. This is kind of my fourth stop, current company of building and running engineering teams. And engineers have always been on, the early adopter side of technology, but it's rare we've ever been on the getting disrupted side. And given that almost all my active friends and family members are somehow connected to tech companies or engineering or writing code, and it's this incredibly uncomfortable feeling that we just talk about a lot. And I talk about it with Mike and John a lot because I have that opportunity. But also, when I take a friend to a basketball game, we'll sit down and we'll be talking, and you're trying to figure out what this new world means. And sometimes some people feel naive, and you want to open their eyes to the extent of possibilities. And it's a startling conversation, and it's just been happening and repeating kind of over and over again. And the reason I'm so excited for this particular podcast, I think sums up the best of this past weekend. Got to spend some time with some of my nieces, and they are about to go into college. A couple of them are in college. One of them's about to go into college. Really an interesting point in their lives where they're trying to figure out, what should I do? And in the past, I was so clearly like, oh, why don't you learn to code? It's the best job in the world. And all of a sudden I find myself, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this question. And this conversation went on for a while, and they come, well, what about this? And I'm like, well, in theory, that knowledge work, LLMs could be good at that too. And I didn't realize this because it was so fun to talk about, that to certain people who just hear this kind of conversation and this disruption, it's really terrifying. And then the point they're like, well, maybe I shouldn't go to college at all. Maybe I shouldn't try to do anything. And I had that moment where I was like, oh my gosh. And it clicked for me, although I've been dealing with this AI thoughts. I don't want to use the word doomerism because that might just be a me, Mike, and John term out there. I've been grokking and I've been trying to wrap my head around this for months. And in that moment, I realized maybe the thing that scares me the most is that the idea of AI is robbing people of ambition, like taking away the idea that they can go and do incredible things, because why would I go do them if AI is already doing it? And it was just like a really like scary moment for me. And I realized it, and we changed the course of the conversation and became empowered and started redirecting it. And I wish I could go back to that basketball game and the other conversation the last few months and talk realistically about what AI is doing, but what AI can't do, what we can't allow it to do, and it won't do, is kill ambition. And that's why I think this podcast hopefully becomes a really awesome resource for people from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of goals, to like find a place where they can talk about things safely and discuss and explore possibilities. And we're not going to be, sugarcoating things or saying some of the nice phrases you might see from other people on LinkedIn, because I think there is a lot of turbulence ahead of us. But there is room for ambition, and I'm super stoked that ambition has a home with this podcast. And so a little bit of my background and what I'm hoping to contribute to this is some engineering specific perspectives, and hopefully navigate this all with y'all and lean into ambition even more. There might not be a better time to be ambitious than right now.
Yeah,
that Jake.
I love it. Yeah, we plan to bring on different guests on different topics. Mike, Jake, and I tend to riff on different things all the time, and so we want it to feel like a living room conversation. We're definitely going to get things wrong. You guys can call us out and tell us where you disagree with us. We will do the same. Mike, I always joke that my love language is Mike telling me that I'm wrong all the time. So this is going to be great. And I think that a couple other things that I would add to that, Jake, I think that was a great way to start things off. I was playing backyard baseball. I don't know if anyone ever played backyard baseball growing up. It's a little video game. I played it on the computer. I was playing it on the iPad with my 5-year-old. And he got really good at this backyard baseball game. I put him on easy mode because he's 5 and felt like, all right, I don't want him to hate this. So, but he ended up winning the championship game like 55-2, which is not a baseball score. And so I said, nice job, Wes. Like you have now graduated to level medium. And he said, okay, I don't know what that means. But so I set him up on a new season, new team, first game, and he strikes out 3 times in a row. Comes up to me, throws the iPad on the ground, sobbing. I hate this. I never want to play baseball. I hate the whole sport of baseball. I hate backyard baseball. I'm never playing this again. And I was like, okay, well, what happened? And he's like, well, I used to be able to just press swing and then it would wait and swing for me at the right time. And now I actually have to press swing when I'm supposed to swing, and I'm not good at it and I hate it and I'm quitting. And so I was like, okay, let's sit down, let's do it together, let's learn. And, we worked through it, struck out a couple more times, and then he figured it out. And now he loves it. And he's competing at the medium level, right? And I was reflecting on that around how it's funny how humans tend to quit when we suck at things. Like our first instinct is like, well, I'd rather just not, if I'm not going to be as good as I want to be, if I'm not going to be the best, then I'd rather just not try at all. You see this in all aspects of life, right? You get rejected one time, you say, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I didn't even want to do that in the first place, right? I'm going to cope by saying, I don't even care. And I actually think AI has a weird effect where it can make us feel that way, where you say, well, I've always been good at this, and I've always derived confidence from this. Well, now this thing is better than me at it. So what happens now? And so I think similar to what you said, Jake, like I think that's going to happen to a lot of us. I think it's probably gone through the Leland company. Every single individual has probably had this moment where they've said, okay, well, this is going to be better than me at that. And I didn't think it would happen so fast, but it's happening. And, so what? And so I'd love for us to explore that here and be able to talk through the so what and spend a lot of time there. And so we'll explore things. We'll be realistic about where things are going to get a whole lot harder, and then we can go deep on the things around practical advice. So, Mike, anything else you would add on what you want out of the show, and then we can dive into a few topics and actually start to explore some things.
No, I agree with what both of you are saying, but kind of on this topic of AI being both terrifying and exciting. I remember seeing this tweet. This was like a couple years ago, but Someone was describing how growing up to them meant realizing that every building, every business, every park, every event you attend required someone to have like a whole bunch of willpower and will that thing into existence. And reality is such that it's just hard to make something happen. And they came to appreciate like, oh, this Smith's or like Walmart next to my house, like someone had to zone that property and then purchase it and build something and run it. And like, wow, think about how much effort it took to build that. And for the people who like are the willers into existence, who are driving things forward, AI can be really exciting because suddenly the barrier to create something has gone down so much. On the other side, and I think everyone's probably a mix of both, the part of you that just wants to take orders, be a cog in a machine, do what you're told is like, you're watching that die essentially. And that can be terrifying of like, oh, a lot of my job is like, oh, I'm told what to do. I follow my instructions. I do it. I'm like a little worker bee in this hive of people. And you're watching AI totally take that from you and be increasingly better than you at doing it and faster and cheaper. So the goal is not to fall into what's left if that's taken away from me. And I think instead to lean into, if I can create anything, what should I be creating? And that can be so exhilarating. There's a guy named Gary Tang who is a partner at Y Combinator, and he was recently talking about how he is juiced up on caffeine and not sleeping because he's just so addicted to vibe coding and like building things. And obviously that's not the answer, but I think there's something real in being so excited about willing things into existence and creating and what that unlocks, and then leaning into that part of your personality and maybe shunning away from, I'm just someone who takes orders and executes on them.
I love it. That's great. Okay, well, let's dive into a couple topics because I think that will be a fun way to get started, and we'll continue to get questions in the chat and we can pull those in if it makes sense. The first thing I'd love to talk about is, what have you seen change in either your work or kind of in some of your friends' work? And then we can kind of talk a little bit about like, okay, if we extrapolate that a little bit, what does that look like? I think I've had more AI conversations with friends that I didn't prompt, that kind of came from a friend calling me or, texting me or something in honestly, probably the last 3 weeks than I've ever had. I got a call from a friend about a week ago who said, hey man, I just needed to like ask you if this AI thing is real. Because I just watched my company go from 120 employees down to 40. And I'm like one of the remaining salespeople. I don't think I'm going to get let go of because I'm, the top salesperson. But I don't know if this company is going to be around because it seems like we're getting really hurt by it. And I think that the layoffs and like company reduction in force, there's various reasons for it. Sometimes it's like very unrelated to AI, and AI is just to blame. Sometimes it's because they've automated work. But I think right now it's probably because, in his specific case, it was because AI has created a plethora of competitors that are selling their product for a much cheaper price. And so they are not winning any more deals. And if they're not winning any deals, then they obviously can't continue to pay for a team. And so, just sitting there talking to him and being able to say, yeah, it is real. Here's what we should, what you should think about doing. He was like, hey, I might just I have a friend that's running this like plumbing business. And I'm like, he was like so scared. He'd sold software his whole career. And he's like, I just got to go connect to the physical world, which he might still do. And I think is a legitimate option that people should consider. But I think he's also really good at selling software. And I think that in many ways, like still you need the human connection to sell things. And so I think that for like, if I were to share like what I've seen change, I think a lot of jobs, I think, especially as you get closer to the product development lifecycle, that don't necessarily need to connect to a person that's outside the company. You obviously have lots of connection. That is changing rapidly, right? Because you are now building agents that are kind of scaling up your work. You've always been working in a confined, like on your computer. It's been documented, the code you've been writing, the specs you've been writing, the designs you've been creating. It seems to be changing rapidly. I think it's changing rapidly for customer facing roles, in that much of what they're selling is sort of changing. It's either not landing anymore, it's being undercut by a vibe coded competitor, or they sell something that maybe connects to the product development lifecycle and thus is harder to sell, right? I think with an Atlassian type company, which we can talk about, and Mike, you spent time there, it's sort of like a double whammy because they both are a software that can be undercut and has formidable competitors, but then they are a software for the product development lifecycle. So it's like a double, they're getting hit double here. So anyways, I'd love to hear from you guys, like what's changed in your work, and then we can kind of talk about, where does that go?
Yeah, there's like so many different ways you could look at this. So one of them is the micro level of how is the day-to-day of a product manager or software engineer or designer changing. And there's a lot that can be said there. Maybe to stay at the macro level of like, what is this meaning for businesses? There was this era, like the 2016 to 2000 or like 2022, where everything Silicon Valley was teaching is like, go find your niche, dominate your niche, build for it. And I think increasingly that strategy is not going to work. And instead, like the platform business is going to be the most interesting or the most powerful. I was listening to an interview from a senior engineering leader at Coinbase, and the way they were talking about AI was not like, oh, we're so excited to lay off a huge percentage of our company, but it was, we have had this massive roadmap of things we've wanted to do and haven't been able to invest in. And AI is finally unlocking this opportunity for us to go after these different things. And so if all you are is like this niche verticalized software, I think you probably are struggling to know, what do I do here? If you're already a platform, the goal is how do I double down on my strengths and expand my aperture of what I'm able to do for customers. Atlassian's a really interesting example here of like, it's very possible that people could vibe code their own project management tools, and that's going to like totally destroy Jira. But the other narrative could be the mix between Confluence, which is their like knowledge center for companies, a Bitbucket that hosts code, Jira, which shows like what teams are caring about and prioritizing. You can create like a really interesting combination of like, I know what the company cares about and is thinking about. I can break that down into tasks, and then I can go and solve it. And so like it could go either way for Atlassian of they're able to become this really interesting platform tool that is vital to the product development process of every company. AI eats them. And frankly, I think it depends on what they do over the next short term. And this is essentially true of every company. Like, you need to figure out what happens when building software is somewhat commoditized.
Don't you think in some ways, though, the niches are interesting, right? It was like, go find a niche for software that is, large enough that you can dominate it, but not too large. Create something for those specific users, but you need enough of those users to like be a profitable business. And it's like, yeah, those niches that are large enough will see increased competition, and maybe the ambitious people that are even on this podcast will be like, well, I'll go compete with Atlassian now. Like that used to be crazy. Or I'll go compete with, this shop that has a $10 million revenue, because if I can do it as a single person business, that's a killer first person business. Now, even if you do, 1/10 of the price and you attack it, it's $1 million a year business for an individual, like super cool. And so it's like, I see that, but at a certain point, there's still like, there's now a new realm of niches that are opening up that are even smaller, that were before kind of too small to tackle with a team. But now you could tackle them with, a team of one or a team of you and agents. And so it's like, I don't know if it's like platform or niche, but maybe the.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point of basically because the cost of investment has gone down so small, there's a whole new realm of viable businesses that wouldn't exist if it required a whole team of people to maintain. But if one person can operate and maintain it themselves, then the relatively small market they're addressing does.
That's the point, right? Which is like, that's where your competition, like if you're going to build a vertical software company, like good luck, because you're going to now have doing that exact thing. And so, maybe if you're a one person shop, you might be okay with that. You might not be, because you might not want to compete with so many different people. But if you're trying to build a more enduring company, that doesn't get, your margins ground to the floor, you probably do need to figure out like, where's the moat here, or where. Yeah. And it could be a platform play, it could be a network effects play, it could be brand, it could be data, it could be, there's all sorts of different modes that we could talk about. But I think that's like, yeah, so it's what happens to your job and what happens to your company when software is like infinite, right? It's basically what it comes down to.
A particularly interesting question for engineers, to go back where I've where I started, which is like engineering is getting disrupted like crazy right now. And it's like I'm still wrapping my head around what it means for me and the team. And like if you lean into the opportunity, it's never been more exciting. But like already the day-to-day job is changed significantly. And like I'm one who's always liked writing code. I would take my laptop with me to the beach and I'd be writing little apps and games during vacation because it's literally just what I like to do. And there's a lot of engineers that are out there like that. And it's such a fulfilling and fun part of the job to actually just write the syntax and compose this program and create something that never existed before. It's a thrill and it's awesome. And it's like, well, now you can just remove the artisanal handwriting of the syntax and you can still create things that never existed before and feel that thrill faster and even more often. But it is very different. If you loved writing the syntax, it's very hard to imagine a future where engineers are effectively doing that when competing against LLMs that are just so much better. And for a long time with AI, it's been like slow at a time adoption, reason about it. It's not good. The context isn't strong enough, this or that. There's always humanness in there. But then eventually most people are going through this process where they experience something that really convinces them that it is going to change and it's never going to be the same again. And with the latest models and stuff, being able to spin up a micro SaaS on that, one of those, my last vacations, I took a couple days off and I used to like write a little game for fun. I built this whole internal SaaS app for like a family newsletter. It was the first time where I think it was legitimately better than I could do if I did it myself. It just wrote better code than me and it did it 100 times faster. And it was this thrill of like, look at this thing I made. I finally built this little app that like my family can use and it's like it's fun, but also it's that terrifying side again. Now, I've realized that I will probably never sit down and handwrite a little artisanal app maybe ever again. Like that's just kind of gone. And it's like the output more than ever, but that journey just looks so much different. And that's something that we're working on at our current team and company. And it's just a transition that's going to happen for engineers. And there's two reactions to that. One, I have a brother who's a true engineer, as he says, not a software engineer, a real engineer. And he was like, well, you don't get it. Most of the world doesn't need that much code in their jobs. And I'm like, I think you've misunderstood this whole story if you think LLMs are about disrupting engineering. I think if they can disrupt code, they can disrupt a lot of things. And I think he will eventually have that same experience as a real engineer where he feels like a part of this job has just changed forever. And the other side of it is I had a friend over and they were listening to this story I was telling about this little app. And he was just like, looked like a deer in headlights. He was terrified. He's like, oh no, this is super sobering, right? And it's like, well, he was trying to apply that to himself and he's in the financial planning industry. And he's like, oh, well, I've been doing I do a lot of Excel. And I'm like, yeah, imagine you can do Excel 1,000 times faster and better in the future. And like, what cool possibilities that open up? And he's like, well, I kind of just do the spreadsheets and the other people kind of do the decision-making and the stuff out of it. And I'm like, well, this is an opportunity for you to get to that decision-making spot. And like, you should really seize that. And I think that conversation was one where he's like, my whole job of what my set of tasks are is fundamentally at risk and therefore going to change. And so this is maybe a long-winded answer when it's like already everything has changed in software engineering on the like typing syntax into a computer, but it's all in the same goal. We're still building incredible software for people to use and delivering experiences, and we're just doing it faster and better. And instead of gatekeeping who can write code, it's about all of a sudden enabling so everyone can write code. And it's a really fascinating change. And I think my main takeaway from like as an engineer is everything has changed. And if you're listening to this and you're like, that sounds like an engineering problem, I think you're probably wrong. It's probably going to be a you situation sooner than later. And instead of listening to that as the doomer, like, oh no, my job's over, it's that get excited about what it's going to allow you to do and be ambitious about it.
Yeah. Well, so I guess I like that a lot. I think what I'm wrestling with is it seems like what people are being hired to do is not changing that much yet from like a output perspective. At least for like, I'm still hiring an engineer to produce code. Now, I expect that the amount of code and the precision and everything continues to increase, right? Because I'm no longer, the bar, well, the floor has been raised, I guess, certain roles more than others, certainly for engineering. And so the how of what you actually are going to get, how you're going to actually get the thing done, and how you're going to get it done at 100 times faster, as you said earlier, or, even beyond that, has to change. Right. And so I think it's like, can't hold, you can still, it appears you can still be hired to do the things that you were doing before, right? Like I still need a product manager. I still need a salesperson. I still need a marketer to go and like market, sell, decide what we build. But how they go about it has to change, and it has to change immediately because of the new capabilities. What scares me is like what happens when the original what I was hired for goes away, if that ever happens, right? But it appears that right now in the industries where this has been most affected, that is still intact, generally speaking. And the people that are thriving in that are the people that are able to do the how so much faster. They're able to produce more code. They're able to sell faster. They're able to, whatever it is that they're trying to do is just supercharged. In many ways, they're transitioning from a software engineer, a product manager, or a seller, or a marketer to an agent manager that is essentially like building teams of agents that are doing things for it. And the amount of leverage and abstraction that they can create is actually how I measure them as an employee, right? As a contributor. And obviously there's certain roles where that is especially possible, engineering being one of them, right? If your job is to write code, there's never been a better time to write a ton of code. If your job is to sell, well, maybe you can automate a lot of your outreach, but the actual process of getting on the call and selling, I can't 100x that just yet, right? I might be able to 100x the amount of outreach, the precision, and the signals I'm getting, but there's obviously going to be certain parts of my job that are more or less automatable. Do you guys agree with that, or would you describe it differently?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was trying to say earlier, of basically like the era of just being a order taker and doing what you are told is dying, and you're basically forcing everyone into a more managerial role of I'm the one who's deciding what needs to be done. So,
Yeah.
and this is true obviously of software, but truly of every industry, where your ability to determine what are the right opportunities, how should we be pursuing them, and like what's the right sequence of events has just like never been more important. And to Jake's point earlier, there's like some sadness in saying like it used to be really nice to just take in an assignment, do it, like, and then move on. And now like you have to give that up and double down on the other side of it, which is how can I be like proactive and aggressive in chasing new opportunities? There was a comment in the chat about like, what does this look like outside of tech? And I think it's truly the same thing, which is I recently went through the process of buying a home, and there was this person we were working with whose whole job was like to print off the paperwork, email it to us, make sure we responded, and had filled it out before we met with like the loan provider. And it's just hard for me to believe that job is still going to exist 2-3 years from now, maybe even 6 months from now, because AI is just so good at those repeat tasks. However, the person who is like selling me my mortgage, like, of course that's going to exist. It's not like homes are going to disappear overnight. And so the more you can be like driving the value and the less you can be a cog in the machine, the better. And I mean, we can dissect that for hours of what does that mean and get into tactical advice, but it's really like a mindset shift.
That's a great comment, Mike. There's another really good question in the chat that I want to bring to this group. I'm going to read it because I think it's well said. It seems like the optimistic take is AI will not completely eliminate tech jobs, but it will change the types of problems these practitioners solve. The pessimistic view, AI will fundamentally disrupt the tech labor market, displacing workers at a scale and pace that causes serious economic and societal harm. Where do you think reality is between these two perspectives? And great question.
That's doomerism bait, John.
Are you going to take it?
I mean, I'm going to take the bait. So, little known fact, and this is not meant to pump anything I'm not especially proud of, but I love science fiction, and I even wrote a little science fiction back in the day. So it's like I've long been in the business, and then I work in tech of trying to project, the future and try and think of what the outcomes are. And modern science fiction is of a very negative variety. It turns out almost all modern science fiction is dystopian. And it turns out there's something in the human psyche that like we find that interesting because it triggers our like survival instincts and makes us feel alive, or it's super engaging. And even the old utopian sci-fi, Star Trek originally started as like this, look at this beautiful world where we're off just exploring and learning and using science to make friends and stuff, has turned into the most recent Star Trek has been pretty dystopian bleak about what the future could look like. And so I do think there's a natural pull to go and lean into the doomerism and try and play things out sequentially and see the potential pain there. And I think what's scary is that it's not science fiction anymore. It's reality. You have computers that are better at thinking than a lot of humans for a lot of tasks that jobs represent. And then you try to play that out. And I don't think you can completely take off the negative outcomes where there are mass disruptions at least within this economic cycle to a lot of traditional roles. I think that is a possibility. And I think most of us agree on this podcast that like there is a distinct chance something like that happens if these models, if you hit the theories where they are, or self-recursively improving and we hit an exponential growth and they get just wildly smarter and better and self-managing. It's hard to not project some negative consequences to the current structure of opportunities. And that's a little scary. But then that will also build new opportunity. And sometimes when people are too like, oh, creative destruction has always worked in the past. I'm like, well, in the past, creative destruction wasn't doing the thinking. The printing press wasn't writing its own books, or like the steam engine wasn't building its own. So it's a little different. I do think like even to lean back to like the hyper niche thoughts or the opportunity that now any one individual can go compete. And it's going to democratize opportunity of what people can create and do. And I'm reasonably confident there is going to be a lot to be optimistic about in there, opportunity-wise. But I'm falling somewhere in the middle of like the pure economic dystopian destruction where there's no output except for like regulation or universal basic income is what saves us, or universal token access as some of the models have been talking about. But, I think there is going to be a lot of change. There's going to be a lot of change. And I suspect change in life is always painful. To John's point with his son, the game changed and it was painful for the son to go from winning to losing for a little bit, but he came out on the other side. And I do suspect there is going to be economic upheaval to at least the painful extent for a modest amount of people. And maybe I'm like hedging it a little bit, but I don't want to go full doomerism. I think we can ride the wave. I think incredible things are going to happen, but things are going to change, and it's going to be painful for the people that don't change with the changing times, I think.
Yeah. And I hope that we can spend time going into each role throughout this show and actually like figure out what does it mean tactically. I think where I might fall, I agree with a lot of what you said, Jake. I think certainly size of company and nature of company matter a ton here. So if you are a pure SaaS company at a very large scale, like I would expect that those businesses tend to be harvesting cash. They tend to be growing a little bit slower. Some of those businesses don't connect to the physical world. And in the worst cases, they connect to product development lifecycle or things that are also changing. And, the current SaaS apocalypse public market theory that basically has suggested that SaaS does not have a ton of value anymore. And I think that's like not totally true from a business perspective. I think there's a lot of like contract lock-in and other painful things about the way we make decisions as people that are just going to be slower for businesses to be hammered by this as business. But I do think the workforce at some of those large companies, pure, SaaS type businesses, are at a significant risk, right? We've seen this with Block. We're seeing this with Meta. We're seeing it with Atlassian. We're seeing it with a lot of companies right now, right? Oracle and others. I think the reality, though, is that not every company are those tech companies, right? A lot of companies connect to healthcare or people. A lot of them connect to physical products like e-commerce. A lot of them connect to other services types of businesses. It's not like the robots aren't building their own robots yet, right? The LLMs are getting better, but LLMs are going to have to make LLMs better before robots start making their own robots. And there's like a time component there. I was at Uber in 2016, when we were talking about self-driving cars being on the road by 2020, and Uber, ended up selling off that division, Waymo ended up being first to market and still is like pretty constrained. So it always takes a little bit longer to connect to the physical world than I think we expect. But I do agree that the nature of this change is definitely different. And I would expect that a lot of those bigger companies will be at risk. And so I think for, the so what there is like, okay, well, if I am at one of those companies or I'm interested in one of those types of roles, what do I do? As Leland, like there's a lot that we can go do. And then we need kind of like at least 1 or 2 point people over the specific domain. And there's always like a little bit more that we want to do because we're a smaller team. And I think that's true of a lot of startups that are trying to just do more with the more they can do. I think when you start to get into the 10,000, 20,000, probably even a few thousand employees, you have to ask the question of, do we need 5,000 engineers on this project if our current engineers are producing code at 100x the rate? You have to have a really big roadmap to be able to justify that.
There's a lot of other tasty questions coming through in the chat, John. Hopefully this conversation is landing where we want it to get people the sense of what Home for Ambition is meant to be. But I don't think we're going to dive into any more comments today. We're going to write them down. We want to dig into all these different industries and talk about the so what and the impacts on as many things as we can figure out. And we would love to go on that journey with you all together, and we hope you come back. But I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping up the content we wanted to hit this week.
Yeah. Let's wrap it here. Thank you guys. These are great comments. We will dive deeper into a lot of them. I think specific industries and roles will be a fun one. And I would expect, again, we do not know the answers to all of this stuff, but we think about it a lot, and we see a lot of people because of Leland, and we focus a lot at Leland on the so what, right? Like we know people need to upskill with AI, so we've built this awesome AI builder program, which we'll be publicly launching soon. We'll share more about that. And we have all these experts that are innovating in these spaces and trying to share their knowledge. We have all these other live events. So there's a lot that we're trying to do to play offense here, and hope that you guys can play offense with us. And hopefully we can kind of form a community here where we can actually wrestle with some of these questions and be there for each other. Because I think the shared human experience in all of this, we can't leave humans to just get destroyed by AI without answers to questions. And I know no one wants that, maybe perhaps except for Dario and Sam, but at least they are still hiring. And so I think they need people to accomplish, and they're paying large sums of money to get their best people. So I think people matter. They continue to matter. They will always matter. And the so what behind the people, and it's the hope that kills you, as Ted Lasso said, but hopefully it's the hope that saves us in this AI wave. So we appreciate you guys joining. Any last words, Jake, Mike? Cool. Nope. We'll wrap it up. I dropped in the link to join us for next week. We'll do this every Wednesday, and we'll release it a couple days later on all the podcasting platforms. And hope to see you guys back. Take care.
See y'all.